This is going to be a two-part video series where I open up my last book entitled Betrayal, which is still in layer 8, and I'm going to point out with the book how I use Scrivener for layers 2 through 6. And then I'm going to go into Microsoft Word and go over how I use Word to finish up layer 7 and 8. Now, I don't offer myself as an expert in writing because I have only been writing novels for 5 years. However, this is the video series I was looking for when I started writing novels. There are thousands of blog posts and YouTube videos on how to write, but I was never able to find a workflow video where someone points out how they applied all of this advice. So this is that video, at least covering my personal techniques. So in part 1, I will go into a technique for coming up with a storyline, which is layer 1, and then I will go into Scrivener and talk about layers 2 through 6. In the second video, I will show you what happens then in Microsoft Word to finish up layers 7 and 8. In each layer, I will try to give you tips for beginners that I developed over this 5-year period of time. Now, some of the tips will be for writers, new writers, but some of the tips will be Scrivener tips. Again, these are the tips I wish I knew earlier on. So I hope you will enjoy the videos, and if you do, I hope you will take the time to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. So here we go. Now, before I enter Scrivener and show you how I work, I want to start at layer 1, which occurs before I enter Scrivener. It starts with a storyline. By storyline, I mean a rough outline of a story that you know you can write. You only need a rough sketch to start. This graphic shows 2 techniques I've used. On the right-hand side is an early technique where I chose to work in Excel. I like the idea of the little boxes, but as the story expanded, I had to keep inserting rows and even copying and pasting sections lower on the sheet. So it turned out to be not that easy, but I just taped a few sheets together and it still worked. Now, if I chose to use the method on the right-hand side again, I would use the back side of cheap wrapping paper and a pencil to sketch out the storyline. Cheap wrapping paper is always plain white on the reverse side. Expensive paper usually has designs on both sides. So if you choose this method, buy your wrapping paper in the dollar store or Walmart. Then I moved to another technique using Freemind software. On the left is a snapshot of 4 potential storylines that I worked up before I chose one to use as the basis of my book that will be released in February of 2025 or thereabouts. I used an online software called Freemind. My technique to find a storyline is to create 4 potential story scenarios. I write out potential scenarios for the book in big strokes and create 4 of them. By the time I write 4 scenarios, one of them calls out to me to be written, and that's the one I choose. So once I have a storyline, I create the spine of the story. This is layer 1, making a list of the spine of the story. I have other videos on this, so I won't go into too much detail here, but that's what I do. You will know when the story has a spine and you are able to fill it out. So this is layer 1. This is a list of how to create a skeleton of a story. This can be used in any genre, but the essential elements will be different. This list is for a mystery or crime story, and it outlines what you would need for a basic skeletal storyline. If you write romance or sci-fi, your elements would be different, but you would need to create this same spine of the story. Here is an example of a storyline from my book entitled Forewarned but Unheeded. On the left-hand side, you can see a section named JJ Shot in His Bedroom. Under that, you will see all the elements that are needed for the story at that point. You can pause the video if you want to take a closer or longer look. So once you have this storyline with a brief outline, it's time to go into Scrivener, and there we will begin with layer 2. Okay, now I am in Scrivener. This is my last book. The title right now is called Betrayal. And we're going to go, we already did layer 1, so this is layer 2. So when I come into Scrivener, there's nothing here because I haven't even started. So you need to pretend that all of these chapters are not written. So I just start out with a few documents called Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. And these indications are already on my storyboard or my story outline. I know exactly what's going to be in Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. Now, if you are more familiar with and more comfortable with using a 3-act storyline, then you can just convert this to whatever you're comfortable with. I just find the 4-part structure allows me to balance the story a bit more. But it does work, whatever structure you're going to use. So that's layer 2, is just setting everything up into a 4-part structure, which takes all of about 5 minutes. So now let's talk about layer 3, writing the scene outlines. Now I'm going to go into layer 6, and I'm going to stretch this over, which is another reason I love Scrivener. You can work on whichever section you want. Now, earlier I copied this so we could see it better down here to the scene outline. So I'll move this over. I copied it here. Okay. So I start off with my little template here. Point of view, time, location, and purpose and clues. The point of view, I don't choose this early on because I don't know whose point of view it will be. So I just leave that blank. But eventually I do choose a point of view. The next one is time and location. So I pick a place for the scene to take place. In other words, I pick a setting, a stage, whatever. And I also pick a time. For some reason, in my stories, the time is always important. For example, this is a vampire story, so, they're not out of the coffin until after sundown. So, but there's also a business that goes on, and those people are up like normal people. So I keep track of the time and the location. And then this one is here to always remind me that everything that you write in the story has to have a purpose to be there. And because I write mysteries and crime novels, it also has to have clues, okay? And so this is a constant reminder that this is not for social commentary or just a research dumping. Everything that's in the scene needs to have a purpose for being there. And in this particular book, I also have added Gothic elements because I track my Gothic elements and supernatural events, vampire events, things like that. So the outline is nothing more than a list of everything that is going to happen in the scene. So I just start out with a list and I just write in what has to happen, almost as if I'm telling someone. There's no dialogue or anything else. It just tracks what action is going to happen in the scene. And I start out numbering, one after the other, but occasionally I'm slipping something else in, and the numbering is not always exact, but that's okay. So by the time I get to the bottom here, then I know that this scene is now finished, and then I go and I start a new document for the next scene. Now, this book is finished, so I have already put in the chapter numbers here. But in the beginning, I don't have chapter numbers, so I just leave the titles, like Stephen flies into Boston, okay? And then that's it. I know that's what's going on in that scene. So you go through your whole storyline, and what you're going to do is you're going to start out by having only your list of outline here. Your scene outline is going to go in the scenes. There's no writing involved. You're just listing what's going to happen in each scene. And by starting off with just the list, you're saving yourself a lot of time, because as you get down through the part 2 and going into part 3, your creative juices as a writer are still operating. And so you are going to come up with better ideas and ways to make it more mysterious. And so rather than start out writing, okay, then you'd have to go back and throw out what you wrote. This way, you just go up, you add another number in your scene outline, and make sure you add something that is going to, fix the skeleton of the story so that you can add in this new creative change. And so by doing this, you're saving yourself all of the angst that goes along with writing something, getting kind of attached to it, and then having to get rid of it because it's no longer the same story. Or worse than that, you will get too attached to what you have written, and you won't allow yourself to go with what you know is a better idea. So anyway, you're going to go all through your story and set up all of your scene outlines. Now, at the end, I I just sketch in the outline. In other words, this is where's the one I must have slipped out of it. But anyway, this is the scene outline here. Okay, and as you can tell, this one is very, very detailed. Okay, everything that happens in the scene is in this outline. But as I come towards the end, I kind of sketch it in, like maybe there's 4 or 5 things that have to happen, because I allow myself space for the creative process that will take place as I'm writing even the scene outline. And also the creative process continues as I write the book. Now we are going into layer 4. I call layer 4 the down and dirty first draft. This is by far the hardest layer you will write, but by separating it out from everything else that has to be done, it's going to make it a lot easier. So now that you have this great scene outline, you're going to go into the scenes. And what I like to do is, let me go to scene 6 because I still have it here, is I copy Control A, Control C, and then over here where it says notes, I copy and paste my scene outline. Okay. And then I begin to write the scene. In other words, now I'm writing as a writer with a couple of provisos, which are as follows. I just write and never look back. This level of writing is you are just writing as best you can. You're not concerned with spelling, grammar, verb tense, none of it. I like to think of myself in this layer as a town crier. Okay. You're just blurting out the story and you're getting it down on paper. And the reason that you're going to do that is because you are still in a highly creative process of writing. So you're going to follow your scene outline. And the only thing you're going to be concerned about is making sure that everything from your scene outline is in the scene. Okay. And then you're going to go to the next scene and do the same thing. There are 1 or 2 tips for this scene here. The first thing that I do is I also fill out my synopsis. And what that is I, instead of having a list of 20 things that I have in the scene outline, because in the scene outline, I have every detail that I want to be in the scene. But for the chapter 6 synopsis, I just put the crucial elements. And the reason I do that is because there is another way to look at your book in Scrivener in the outliner mode. And what happens in that mode is you will only see this section of the synopsis, but it's enough information for you to look at the story to see if everything is covered, if everything is balanced, things like that. So after I finish writing the scene, I just come over and jot down what was in the story. I'll show you a few here. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to mention, and this is a tip that I developed over time, which I found very helpful, is that let's say at the end of this scene, it's only about 7 p.m. So you can put in here area to add a love scene, let's say. Okay. And then what I do is I highlight it using the highlighter over here. And then this way, if I come upon a situation where I want to add a love scene, or maybe I need to add another scene because of a different idea that came up, I don't have to like read the whole book to figure out where can I put that scene. I've already left myself these guideposts here. So this is a good tip for beginners, not only to writing, but also beginners to Scrivener itself. Let me check my notes here. That's pretty much all that I cover in the down and dirty first draft is just get your scenes in, put a little synopsis here, make sure you have a title that is going to jog your memory so you know which scene this is. The more you work with the story, the more you're going to know the story like the back of your hand. I don't even need to tell you this. You already know this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about layer 5. Now, I have opened this story in the outline mode. I think it's called that. Yeah, outliner mode. Okay, you have your writing mode. This is for the cards, which aren't big enough for me to use. And this is the outliner mode. Okay. Now I'm showing you this first so that the following information that I give you, you'll be able to understand better why I use the keywords and sections that I do. Once the story is written in layer 4, as I go into layer 5, I want to take a look at how the story is balanced. So I follow the background dropped. Now, the reason I follow the background dropped is because I write in series, but I also want each of the books to be able to be read as a standalone. So I need to drop enough background into the story so that the reader can understand what has happened in the past without giving away the best parts of it so it doesn't ruin the story. But I like to track that in each of these scenes. Okay, and again, right now they are in chapters because the book is finished. But when I first go into layer 5, they have no chapters. They're just scenes. It's just one scene after another. So I set up my meta tags for background drop, story elements, so I know I have the hook. This is the introduction to all of the funeral staff, Dr. Liliana, blah, blah, blah. So I have all of the different story elements in here. I also have a box called descriptions because I have to describe the clients for people who are reading the book and don't know what they look like. But I also have to be careful not to overdo it because I have people that read the whole series. So I like to track, how I have described the characters. Now, because this is a vampire book, I'm tracking also like ghost elements, vampire elements, supernatural elements, things like that. And I also like to track the relationships because there's two couples in the story, and I just like to, track how much attention they have been given in the story because it has to do with the balance of the story. Okay, so with that explanation, let's go back into the book. Okay, so now I'm in the writer's mode, and I'm going to come down here to chapter 6. Okay, and I'm going to pull this over, and I'm going to turn on my inspector here and just move this in here and move this guy over here. Actually, I'm going to leave him out so I could show you where this all takes place. So this is the default view. So up here, there is a row of icons. And the middle one is where you are going to put your keywords and your story elements. So right here, when you open it up, this is probably closed. The custom metadata and the keywords is probably closed too. But in any event, custom metadata is where I have the story elements. So let me show you how that works. Okay, so you would just click on this ellipsis and open up this dialog box, and you're over here in the custom metadata section. Okay, and these are the ones that I have added. We just went over these, okay, in the descriptions. So what you would do is there's a tiny little plus sign up here. You would click on the plus sign and then put like, say you wanted to, this one is this one is a vampire story, but let's say it was a mystery, and we're going to have another one called interviews. Okay, and I'm going to wrap the text, aligned it left, and you can change the color of the text. I'm not going to do it for this one. Okay, and then just click OK. Okay, it took me a minute to figure this out, but over here is where you would find those. So there's a tiny little arrow here, and if you go up or down, it will show you all of the different sections that you have created as custom metadata. And it works pretty much the same as with the keywords. You just click on the ellipsis here, and you can also choose show project keywords. Okay, so these are all of the keywords that I have chosen to use for my story. And I'll tell you just a few of the reasons why, because this has to do with technique. Okay, so I follow Darius and Sierra. They're a couple. Charlie and Darius, they're boss, and that's Vampire and the Vampire Watcher. I track the background. Okay, there's another couple that I think is only in one scene in this book, John Luke or Genevieve. Okay, the monks are involved in this story. Okay, there's a concept of tyrannicide that comes up. So by using the keywords, what happens is you can come over here to the search box. Actually, I think it's the one with the magnifying glass, and then you can do project search, and then it says here it defaults to keywords. So let's do monks. All right, and what happens is it brings up all of the scenes that the monks were mentioned in. And what I like about this is you can then isolate the story that's going on with the monks all by itself. So you can read through it to double check to make sure that you have all of the elements that you need. And you can also double check to make sure you haven't repeated anything in that level of the story. And then let's see what else. What other ones do? Okay, let's do Darius and Stefan. Okay, and so that brings up all of the scenes that have these two characters in them. And so you can then read to check that. So now that I have explained the metadata, let's go back to the story and I will explain to you what happens now in layer 5. So let's go back to, let's get rid of this, click off this, and go back to just the project search, and we'll just come back to the binder. I'm not sure how to get rid of this. There you go. You just X out of it. Okay, so here's the whole story. So in layer 5, this is going to be the first proofread, but it's really a read through because you're not going to be really worried about grammar structure, verb tense, anything like that. There's no polishing going on in this layer. This is just a read through to make sure that your sentences are flowing and that your scenes are flowing one to the other and that everything kind of makes sense. Now, during this layer is when you are going to add in your keywords. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube about how to create keywords, so I'm not going to waste your time with that because I'm assuming you already know it. But in layer 5, you're just going to read through to make sure that everything lines up and your sentences are just flowing one to the other and that, you know, you're just getting a feel for the whole story now being told. Then also in this layer, you're going to check and make sure that you put in a synopsis. Because in the down and dirty draft, sometimes you're just, you know, you're going from one scene to the next and you might forget to put in your synopsis. So just check and make sure that you have your synopsis. Now, when you come to the end of this, you go through all of your scenes and you read the story together. Then you're going to go to the outline and you have to be in the draft. You have to be in the top layer. Then you come over here to the top 3 icons and click on the one on the right-hand side, which is the outliner view. And then you click this off to get rid of the inspector window. And this is where this is where you will see all of your keywords and all of your story elements as you have set them up. This does not default into this setup. What you're going to need to do is go to View, Outliner Options, and then you're going to have to check the ones that you want. Like let's say we just want more space, so let's get rid of this relationship ones, and that, see, it takes it off. So then you'll have more space, okay? And let's say you just want to come in and check your background. You can set it up where you have more space for your synopsis, and you can just check to make sure that you have dropped any background information that you are dropping into the story, okay? And so let's say you already know you have the hook and the inciting incident and everything like that. So if you want to get rid of the, let's see, outliner options, let's see, we're going to get rid of the story element. You just uncheck it, okay? And then it brings it down and gives you a bit more space to be able to view just a few of them. So once you get through this whole process, that ends layer 5. Okay, so now we're going into layer 6. And this is the first real proofread for actual prose. Okay, so before I get started in this layer, I bring up my list of troublesome words. Where's my list of troublesome words? Here it is. I have collected a list of all my favorite mistakes. Okay. I tend to use ing verbs. Okay. I use he could, he would, he should, things like that I need to change to past tense actual verbs. So, and then I just have some other mistakes that I just tend to make. I use probably too much. Okay, so what I have found recently is how to use project replace to force myself to check each one of some of my favorite mistakes, and I'll show you how that works. As you go into layer 6, you're not going to have these chapters here because that's what you're going to do in layer 6. But before I get going, I come up to Edit, Find, and then Project Replace. Okay? And then I will take one of my favorite mistakes, Begin or Began, and then I will replace it with all caps. And then down here I have Ignore Case. I uncheck that. And then I change it only in the text. So I uncheck these. Notes, synopsis, and custom made. I just want it in the text. And then Project Replace is very powerful. So once you click Replace, it's going to change the word begin lowercase and make it all uppercase. Okay, I'm not going to do it because I'm already done with this book. But I did do it as I went into layer 6. And I did it for several of my favorite mistakes, one of which is the ing verbs. Now, as you're writing, you're thinking in, at least I am, thinking in concept, story concept, what's happening. But a reader is reading and they're almost saying the words in their mind. So if you have too many ing verbs, it's ing, 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 ing in their head, and it's too much. So I capitalized every single ing in the whole book. So in layer 6, as I went through it, it forced me to stop and change it. Because the other part of my troublesome words is that I read right over them. I proofread right over them. They don't catch my eye because they're a representation of my own weakness. So by having them all in caps, it forced me to look at each and every one of them and decide, should I change this or should I not change this? So I did that as I read through. And I think I've already said, but if I didn't, I'll say it again. This is the layer that you're going to change the sentences into prose. So you are looking at sentence structure and you are looking at your verb tense. Now, another thing that I did that was very helpful the last time as I was proofreading this book is I took the chapters one at a time. Now, where is that? One at a time, and ran them through Grammarly Grammar Check, okay, which is free. Now, this is a free program, and I did at one time download it onto my computer, but it was following me everywhere. In other programs, on the internet, it was like being stalked. So I had to I had to take it off my computer. It was just too much. But I copied and pasted every single chapter. And what this did was it helped me focus on my verb tenses in the sentences, which can be another weakness of mine. So I made those changes to my text before I started reading through for my other mistakes. And I found that very, very helpful. Let me go back to Scrivener. Here we go. And then as you're reading through, you're going to change your prose and you're going to also put in your chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1s. And sometimes the chapters you'll have more than 1 or 2 scenes in the chapter. So for the next scene, you just open it up and it's just a new scene. Now, at the end of the scenes, I just used a couple of 3 or 4 asterisks to indicate that the scene is ending. And those I translate to something else in the next layer, layer 7, where I will be in Microsoft Word. But anyway, what goes on in layer 6 is the first real proofread. You are changing everything to prose. Okay, so that's what you want to do in layer 6. You are changing your sentences to prose, and you are also adding your chapters. And you're also adding some mark that you're going to use between your scenes. And then when you come to the end of the book, then you're done with layer 6. Okay, now there was one more thing I wanted to say about layer 6, and that is that layer 6 will probably need more than one read through. In other words, you're going to read through the first time and make a lot of corrections. But then you're going to want to go back and read it through again. Of course, all of your words that you had capitalized, they'll be changed. All of your verb tenses will be fixed. And now you're just reading through to make sure that it's still one sentence flows to the next. And as you're reading, you will still see things that you want to change. And this is where you're going to be polishing your writing. So it will require at least 2 read-throughs, and maybe even if you're new, it will require 3 read-throughs. But that's okay, because polishing the book at this point is much easier than trying to polish, in the beginning of writing a book, and then everything changes and and it all goes out the window. So I just find that this is a much easier and more efficient way to write a novel. I'm not the authority on all things in this field. This is more or less the video I wish was around when I first started. That's my point here. So at this point for me, I take the final draft, the final proofread from Scrivener, and I compile it out to Microsoft Word. Now I'm going to continue layer 7 and 8, which take place in Microsoft Word, in another video, in the next video, because this one I'm just dedicating to Scrivener. But at this point, in order to compile the book, you just click on File, Compile. I believe it defaults to Microsoft Word .docx file, but if it doesn't, there's a drop down here and you can choose it. Okay, I just leave it on default. And over here, I make sure that I have all of the chapters checked and any other documents that are not part of the book unchecked. So just go through these once and make sure that all your chapters are checked and your research and all of the pages that you just used for other things are unchecked. And at this point, you're just going to click on compile, and it will take, a minute maybe to compile it. And then your Microsoft Word will pop up and you'll get to save it as the manuscript. And just another tip, I would put the manuscript in a file that you have named pre-publication. And the reason I say that is one of the biggest problems I had as a new writer, I would always lose my last manuscript because I was afraid to throw anything out, and I had them all over the place. So that was a big problem for me. So right now I just have one folder. It says pre-publication. I put it in there. And when I give it to the editor, I put it in another file that says to the editor. And then once it goes up to Amazon, then I put it in, final publication, a folder called final publication. So anyway, so that's all for Scrivener. The book is now ready to be proofread again. There's another 2 layers of polishing and proofreading, which I'll get into in the next video. To the right are my 3 book series that are available for purchase on Amazon.com. Most of the books are presently in Kindle Unlimited. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything, I hope you will give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.